The dust had become so thick in Xander Kincaid's throat that he could no longer remember what water tasted like without grit. And as he stared at the cracked earth where his cattle used to graze, he realized that sometimes a man could lose everything before breakfast and still have the entire day to watch it all crumble further. It was August 1879 in Petaluma, California, and the drought had stretched into its third merciless year. The rolling hills that surrounded the small town, once green and lush with grass, had turned the color of old bones. Xander stood at the edge of what used to be his ranch, his boots planted in soil that had forgotten the meaning of rain. At 28 years old, he had inherited this land from his father 5 years ago, built it up with his own hands, his own sweat, his own dreams. Now those dreams lay scattered like the bleached cattle bones that dotted his property. The bank notice crumpled in his fist felt heavier than any burden he had ever carried. 3 months. That was all the time they were giving him to settle his debts or lose the land entirely. But how could a man make money from dirt that would not grow grass, from cattle that had already died, from wells that produced nothing but false hope? Xander walked back toward his house, a modest structure that his father had built in 1852 when California was still wild and full of promise. The porch sagged now, the paint had peeled away years ago, and the windows reflected nothing but the harsh glare of an unforgiving sun. Inside, the house echoed with emptiness. His parents were gone, his mother to fever 6 years past, his father to a bad heart shortly after. His younger brother had headed to San Francisco in search of fortune 2 years ago and had not written since. There was no one left, just Xander and his failures. He needed to go into town, to face the reality of his situation, to perhaps find work that might at least keep him fed while he figured out what came next. The ride into Petaluma proper took 30 minutes on his horse, Shadow, one of the few animals that had survived the drought. The mare was thin but steady, and Xander was grateful for her loyalty even as he wondered how long he could keep feeding her. Petaluma's main street was quieter than usual, the drought having driven many families to seek better fortunes elsewhere. The general store still stood, as did the saloon, the church, and a handful of other establishments that served the stubborn folks who refused to abandon their homes. Xander tied Shadow to the hitching post outside the general store and stepped inside, grateful for the shade even if the air was just as hot. Martha Henderson, the store owner's wife, looked up from behind the counter and offered him a sympathetic smile. She was a round woman in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen plenty of hard times. "Xander Kincaid, how are you holding up?" "Been better, Miss Martha." He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair that was too long and badly in need of a cut. "I am looking for work." "Anything available?" Martha's expression grew more sympathetic. "Times are tough all over, son. Most folks are barely scraping by themselves. Have you tried the lumber mill? Closed down last month. The railway office, they are not hiring." Martha sighed, her fingers drumming on the wooden counter. "There might be something. Rose Jameson has been looking for help at her place. Her husband died last winter, left her with that property east of town and more work than one woman can handle alone." Xander knew of Rose Jameson, though he had never met her personally. Her husband, Thomas Jameson, had been a successful rancher who had somehow managed to prepare for the drought better than most, storing water and hay, reducing his herd early. When Thomas had died in a riding accident back in February, it had shocked the whole community. The man had survived the drought only to be thrown from his horse and break his neck. "What kind of help is she needing?" Xander asked. "General ranch work, I expect." "Repairs, tending to the animals she has left, that sort of thing. Her place has a good well that has not run dry yet. She has been managing with her late husband's savings, but she needs strong hands." Martha paused, studying him carefully. "She is a good woman, Xander, honest and hardworking. Lost her first husband in the war years back, then lost Thomas just 6 months ago. Life has not been kind to her, but she has not let it make her bitter." Xander nodded slowly. Pride warred with desperation in his chest, but desperation was winning. "Where exactly is her property?" "About 5 miles east, near the creek bed. Though calling it a creek these days is generous. It is mostly dried up, but her well is deeper than most. You will see her house, a white 2-story with a red barn, cannot miss it." "I appreciate the information, Miss Martha." As Xander turned to leave, Martha called out, "Xander, do not give up. Things have a way of working out, even when it seems impossible." He wanted to believe her, but belief was a luxury he could no longer afford. The ride to Rose Jameson's property took him along a dusty road that wound through parched landscape. Here and there, he passed abandoned homesteads, their windows dark and empty, their fields surrendered to the drought. It was a sobering reminder that he was not alone in his suffering, though that knowledge provided little comfort. When he finally spotted the white 2-story house with the red barn, he was surprised by how well maintained everything looked. The house showed signs of care, the barn was in good repair, and there were even a few struggling vegetables in a fenced garden that had clearly been watered with great care. Smoke rose from the chimney despite the heat, suggesting someone was cooking. Xander dismounted and approached the house, his boots heavy on the packed earth. Before he could knock, the door opened, and he found himself face to face with Rose Jameson for the first time. She was not what he expected. Perhaps 30 years old, she had auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, though several strands had escaped to frame her face. Her eyes were a striking green, the color of spring grass in better times, and they assessed him with a directness that was both disconcerting and refreshing. She wore a simple brown dress with the sleeves rolled up, and there was flour on her hands. She was pretty in an understated way, her features more interesting than classically beautiful, with a strength in her bearing that spoke of resilience. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice clear and steady. Xander cleared his throat. "Miss Jameson, my name is Xander Kincaid. Martha Henderson at the general store mentioned you might be looking for help around your property." Rose studied him for a long moment, and Xander felt himself being measured in that gaze. Finally, she nodded. "I know who you are. You have the ranch west of here. Your father was Samuel Kincaid." "Yes, madam, though I am afraid the ranch is not much of anything these days. The drought has been hard on everyone." She wiped her hands on her apron. "I do need help, Mr. Kincaid. My husband left me with more work than I can manage alone, and I cannot afford to let this place fall apart. What kind of work are you experienced in?" "I have run a cattle ranch for 5 years, done every job there is to do. I can repair buildings, tend animals, work with horses, fix fences, dig wells, pretty much anything that needs doing." Rose nodded slowly. "I can offer room and board plus $20 a month. It is not much, but it is what I can afford right now. There is a small cabin out back where my husband's foreman used to stay before he moved on. It is clean and dry. You would take meals in the main house. Work would be dawn to dusk, 6 days a week. Sundays you would have to yourself. $20 a month would not save his ranch, but it would keep him fed and give him time to think, to plan. More importantly, it would give him purpose when everything else had fallen away." "That sounds fair, Miss Jameson." "It is Mrs. Jameson," she corrected gently. "I am a widow, not a spinster. There is a difference." "My apologies, Mrs. Jameson. Can you start today?" "Yes, madam." "Then put your horse in the barn and get settled in the cabin. Supper will be at 6. We can discuss the work that needs doing over the meal." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "I heard about your situation, Mr. Kincaid, the bank foreclosure. I am sorry. I know what it is like to lose things that matter." There was genuine sympathy in her voice, and it surprised him. Most people either pitied him or judged him, as if the drought was somehow his fault, his failure. But Rose Jameson spoke like someone who understood that sometimes the world just took and took, no matter how hard you fought. "Thank you, madam. I appreciate the work." She nodded and closed the door, leaving him standing in the yard with the sun beating down on his shoulders and the first small spark of something like hope flickering in his chest. The cabin was small but serviceable, with a bed, a chair, a small table, and a wood stove. It was clean, as Rose had promised, and after months of watching his own home fall into disrepair, there was something comforting about being in a space that someone had cared for. Xander unpacked his few belongings, tended to Shadow in the barn where he was pleased to find hay and fresh water, and then spent the remaining hours until supper exploring the property. Rose's ranch was smaller than his had been, but it was efficiently organized. She had about 30 head of cattle, far fewer than most ranchers kept, but they looked healthy and well fed. There were chickens, a few pigs, and 3 other horses besides Shadow. The well was indeed deep and still producing water, which explained how everything had survived. Xander could see signs of Thomas Jameson's preparation everywhere: the carefully stored hay, the reinforced water storage tanks, the strategic positioning of shade structures for the animals. The man had been smart and forward-thinking. His death had been a genuine loss. At 6 o'clock, Xander knocked on the back door of the main house, and Rose let him in. The kitchen was warm and smelled wonderfully of fresh bread and roasted chicken. It had been so long since Xander had smelled real cooking that his stomach growled audibly. Rose gestured to the table. "Sit." "I hope you are hungry." "Very much so, madam." She served him a plate piled high with food, more than he had eaten in a single meal in months. There was chicken, potatoes, carrots from her garden, fresh bread with butter, and even a small slice of apple pie. Xander stared at it all, feeling something uncomfortably like emotion tighten his throat. "This is too much," he said quietly. "You are going to be working hard. You need to eat properly." Rose sat across from him with her own smaller plate. "Go on. You look like you have not had a decent meal in weeks." She was not wrong. Xander had been rationing his supplies, making them stretch as far as possible, often going to bed with his stomach only half full. Now, faced with abundance, he almost did not know where to start. He ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some dignity, but the food was so good and his hunger so deep that he soon gave up pretense and simply ate. Rose watched him with those observant green eyes but said nothing. Just let him eat. When he finally set down his fork, his plate clean, she refilled his coffee cup and cut him another slice of pie. "Thank you, Mrs. Jameson. That was the best meal I have had in a very long time." "You are welcome." She sipped her own coffee. "Tomorrow, I need you to start with the barn roof. There are some shingles that need replacing before the rains come. If they ever come, I can do that. And the fence on the south pasture has some weak spots. The cattle have not tested it yet, but I would rather fix it before they do." "Yes, madam." They discussed the various tasks that needed attention, and Xander found himself impressed by how well Rose understood her property and its needs. She was not a woman playing at ranching. She knew the work, understood the challenges, and had clear priorities. Her husband had taught her well, or perhaps she had always been capable and the drought had simply forced her to prove it. As the conversation wound down, Rose studied him across the table. "May I ask you something personal, Mr. Kincaid?" "Of course." "Why did you not prepare better for the drought? Your father was a smart man, did he not leave you with reserves? It was a blunt question, but Xander appreciated the directness. He did. I had reserves, but the drought kept going longer than anyone expected. First year, I used my savings. Second year, I sold off most of my herd at a loss because I could not feed them. Third year, I have been trying to hold on to the land itself, but the bank wants their money. I made mistakes too, held on too long to cattle I should have sold earlier, believed too much in the idea that the rains would come back. Pride, I suppose. My father built that ranch from nothing. Letting it go feels like betraying him. Rose nodded slowly. I understand that. But sometimes holding on to the past means losing the future. Is that what you did? Let go of the past. A shadow crossed her face. I am trying to. My first husband died at Gettysburg in 1863. I was 20 years old and newly married. I thought my life was over. Then I met Thomas 6 years later. He was patient and kind, and he taught me that life keeps going whether you are ready or not. Now he is gone too, and I am learning the lesson all over again. This land, this ranch, it is not about the past. It is about survival, about finding reasons to keep going. Her words struck something deep in Xander's chest. He had been so focused on what he had lost that he had stopped thinking about what might still be possible. I am sorry for your losses, he said quietly, and I am sorry for yours. Rose stood, gathering the dishes. You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Xander helped her clear the table despite her protests, and then headed back to his cabin under a sky full of stars. For the first time in months, he fell asleep with a full stomach and something resembling peace. The next morning, Xander was up before dawn, as was his habit. He found Rose already in the barn feeding the animals with practiced efficiency. She looked surprised to see him. You are an early riser, she observed. Old habits. Can I help? Together, they completed the morning chores, working in a comfortable silence. Xander appreciated that Rose did not feel the need to fill every moment with conversation. They moved around each other naturally, as if they had been working together for years rather than hours. After a substantial breakfast of eggs, bacon, and more of that incredible bread, Xander climbed onto the barn roof with his tools and began replacing shingles. The work was hot and demanding, but it felt good to have purpose again, to be building instead of watching things fall apart. From his elevated position, he could see the surrounding landscape, the parched hills and dried creek bed, but he could also see the small green oasis that Rose had maintained through sheer determination. She appeared below around mid-morning with a jar of cool water from the well. You should take a break. The heat is only going to get worse. Xander climbed down and drank gratefully. Rose stood in the shade of the barn, her face flushed from her own work in the garden. Up close, he noticed details he had missed the day before, the small scar on her chin, the laugh lines around her eyes despite her relatively young age, the capable strength in her hands. How long have you been managing this place alone? He asked. Since February. Almost 6 months now. I had a hired hand for the first 2 months, but he left when a better opportunity came along in Sacramento. Cannot blame him. This is hard work for uncertain reward. But you stayed. I had nowhere else to go, and despite everything, I love this land. Thomas and I plan to build something lasting here. I am not ready to give up on that dream just because he is not here to see it. There was fierce determination in her voice, and Xander found himself admiring it. You are doing a remarkable job. This place is in better shape than most in the county. Rose shrugged. Thomas taught me to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. We started conserving 3 years ago when the drought first began. We dug the well deeper, stored everything we could, reduced our herd size. People thought we were being paranoid, but it kept us alive. It is keeping me alive still. Your husband was a wise man. He was. Her expression grew distant. He used to say that survival was not about being the strongest or the smartest, but about being the most adaptable. I am trying to honor that lesson. They stood together in the shade, two survivors in a harsh landscape, and Xander felt an unexpected kinship with this widow who had lost so much but refused to break. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Xander would rise early, help Rose with the morning chores, then spend the day working through her list of repairs and improvements. He fixed the barn roof, reinforced the fence, repaired the chicken coop, cleaned out the water storage tanks, and a dozen other tasks. Rose worked alongside him when she could, tending her garden, caring for the animals, managing the household. They took their meals together, breakfast and supper in the main house, and slowly, conversation began to flow more easily between them. Xander learned that Rose had grown up in Ohio, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress. She had married her first husband, Jonathan, at 19, and he had gone to war just 3 months later. She had waited for him, but he had never come home. She had moved west in 1867, seeking a fresh start, and had met Thomas Jameson in Sacramento. He had been older, in his 40s, but kind and stable. They had married in 1868 and spent 10 years building their life together before his accident. Did you love him? Xander asked one evening over supper, then immediately regretted the personal question. I am sorry, that was inappropriate. But Rose did not seem offended. I did love him, not the same way I loved Jonathan. That was young love, all passion and dreams. What I had with Thomas was different. Deeper, maybe. We were partners. We understood each other. I miss him every day, but not in the way that destroys you. More in the way that reminds you that good things were real, even if they are gone now. Xander understood that. He had never been married, never had that kind of partnership, but he understood the difference between destructive grief and the kind that honored what had been lost. In turn, he told Rose about his own life, about growing up on the ranch, learning everything from his father, the plans he had made to expand and improve. He told her about his mother's death, his father's decline, his brother's departure. He told her about the slow, grinding horror of watching the drought consume everything he had worked for. You hate your brother for leaving? Rose asked. Xander considered that. No, he wanted something different. The ranch was my dream, not his. I cannot fault him for following his own path, even if the timing was difficult. That is generous of you, or maybe just realistic. Bitterness would not bring him back or save the ranch. A month passed, then 2. Summer gave way to early autumn, though the drought showed no signs of breaking. Xander sent his $20 each month to the bank, knowing it was nowhere near enough, but hoping it demonstrated his intent to pay. The bank sent back stern letters reminding him of his deadline. But despite the weight of his impending loss, Xander found himself experiencing something unexpected: contentment. Working Rose's ranch was satisfying in a way his own had not been for years. Perhaps it was because he was not carrying the burden of ownership and all its pressures, or perhaps it was the companionship. He had not realized how lonely he had become until he was no longer alone. Rose seemed to feel it too. She smiled more as the weeks passed, and sometimes Xander would catch her watching him as he worked, a thoughtful expression on her face. They had fallen into an easy partnership, anticipating each other's needs, working together with an efficiency that spoke of growing familiarity. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch after supper watching the sun set over the parched hills, Rose turned to him with an unusually serious expression. "Xander, may I ask you something?" He had stopped being Mr. Kincaid sometime in the second month, though he still called her Mrs. Jameson out of respect. Of course. What are you going to do when the bank takes your land? It was a question he had been avoiding, but he should have known Rose would confront it directly. I do not know. I suppose I will have to find permanent work somewhere. Maybe I could continue working here if you will have me. Of course I would have you. You are the best help I have ever had. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But is that really what you want? To work another person's land for the rest of your life? I want to survive, he said honestly. Beyond that, I am not sure I have the luxury of wants anymore. Rose was quiet for a moment, her eyes on the horizon where the sun was painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I have been thinking about something. A proposition, I suppose. You can say no and it will not affect your job here. I want you to know that up front. Xander felt something shift in the air between them, a tension that had not been there before. All right. This ranch is doing well, all things considered, but it is too much for one person to manage long term. I have been struggling, and having you here these past 2 months has shown me how much easier things could be with a true partner. She took a breath. I am proposing a business arrangement. If you are willing, we could combine our resources. My land and savings, your experience and labor. We could run this ranch together as equal partners. Xander stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Rose, I do not have any resources left. I am about to lose everything. You have yourself, she said firmly. You have your knowledge, your work ethic, your dedication. That has value. If we were partners, you would have a stake in this place, a real future instead of just wages. We could build something together. It was an incredibly generous offer, but Xander's pride reared up. I cannot accept charity. It is not charity. It is a business proposition. I need help and you need a future. We would both benefit. But you would be taking all the risk. What do I bring except my labor, which you are already paying for? Rose turned to face him fully, her green eyes intense. You bring partnership. You bring someone I can trust, someone who understands this life and this land. You bring someone who will be as invested in this ranch's success as I am. That is worth far more than you think. Why me? Xander asked quietly. You could find another rancher, someone with actual capital to invest. Because I trust you, Rose said simply. Because these past 2 months, you have proven yourself honest and hardworking. Because we work well together. Because I think we could make this ranch into something special. She hesitated. And because I think you deserve a second chance, just like I got one when I met Thomas. Xander felt his throat tighten with emotion. No one had offered him hope in so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like. I would be in your debt. No, Rose said firmly. We would be partners, equal partners. I would draw up papers making it official, 50-50 ownership. What happens to this ranch, good or bad, we face together. Rose, I do not know what to say. Say you will think about it. You do not have to answer tonight. She stood, brushing off her skirt. But Xander, I want you to know something. These past 2 months have been the best I have had since Thomas died. Having you here, working together, sharing meals, talking in the evenings, it has reminded me what partnership feels like. Even if you say no to my business proposition, I want you to know that you have given me something valuable. You have reminded me that I am not alone. She went inside before he could respond, leaving him on the porch with the stars emerging overhead and his mind spinning with possibilities he had thought were lost forever. Xander did not sleep that night. He lay in his cabin thinking about Rose's offer, examining it from every angle. Part of him wanted to accept immediately, to grasp this lifeline with both hands. But another part, the part that had watched his own ranch die despite his best efforts, was terrified of bringing his failure to her doorstep. What if his bad luck was contagious? What if partnering with him somehow tainted her success? She had managed to survive the drought through careful planning and hard work. Did she really need to share that success with someone who had lost everything? But as the night wore on and he thought about Rose's words, he began to see things from her perspective. She was not offering him charity. She was offering him partnership because she genuinely needed help, and she trusted him to provide it. More than that, she saw value in him when he could barely see it in himself. And if he was honest, these past 2 months had been the best he had experienced in years too. Working beside Rose, building instead of watching things crumble, sharing meals and conversation, feeling like he mattered to someone. It had awakened something in him that he had thought the drought had killed. Hope. When morning came, he found Rose already in the barn. She looked tired, as if she had not slept well either. She glanced up when he entered, her expression carefully neutral. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Good morning." Xander took a breath. "I thought about your offer." Rose stopped what she was doing, her hands stilling on the pitchfork she was holding. "And? I want to say yes, but I need to understand something first. This is not about the business, not really. I need to know why you truly want me as a partner. Is it just because you need help, or is there something else?" Rose set down the pitchfork, and for a moment vulnerability crossed her face. "You want me to be completely honest, please." She took a breath. "Yes, I need help. That part is true, but I could have hired any number of men. I offered partnership to you specifically because over these past 2 months, I have come to care about what happens to you. Not in a business sense, in a personal sense. You have become important to me, Xander. Your success matters to me. Your happiness matters to me. I want you to have a future, and I want to be part of that future. Rose, I am not asking for anything beyond partnership," she added quickly. "I am not proposing marriage or making any demands. I just want you to know that my offer comes from a place of genuine caring, not just business necessity. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe it is better that you refuse. But I wanted to be honest." Xander crossed the barn until he was standing directly in front of her. "It does not make me uncomfortable. It makes me feel like maybe I have not lost everything after all." Hope flared in her eyes. "Does that mean yes?" "Yes. If you will have me as a partner, I accept." The smile that lit up Rose's face was like sunrise after a long night. "Truly, truly. Though I warn you, you may be getting the worse end of this deal. Let me be the judge of that." She extended her hand and he shook it, her grip firm and warm. "Partners, partners." They stood there in the barn, hands clasped, and something passed between them that was more than just business agreement. It was a promise, a beginning, a mutual acknowledgement that they had both found something valuable in each other. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Rose rode into town and met with a lawyer to draw up partnership papers. Xander accompanied her, and together they made it official. 50-50 ownership of the ranch, all decisions to be made jointly, profits and losses shared equally. The lawyer raised his eyebrows at the arrangement, clearly curious about the nature of their relationship, but Rose shut down any questions with her direct, no-nonsense manner. Word spread through Petaluma that Rose Jameson had taken on a partner, and people talked, as people always did in small towns. Some were supportive, saying it was smart for a widow to have help. Others whispered that it was inappropriate, that there was surely more going on than business. Rose ignored the gossip with impressive dignity, and Xander tried to follow her example, though it grated on him that people would question her honor. The bank sent a final notice about Xander's ranch in October, giving him 2 weeks to settle his debts or lose the property entirely. He rode out to his old place one last time with Rose beside him. She had insisted on coming, saying that she should see what they were losing, even if she had never owned it. Standing in the yard of his childhood home, looking at the sagging porch and the empty fields, Xander felt grief wash over him. This was where his mother had taught him to read on rainy afternoons. This was where his father had shown him how to rope a calf. This was where he had dreamed of building a future. "I am sorry," Rose said quietly beside him. "I know this hurts. I keep thinking I should have done something different, sold earlier, spent less, worked harder, something. You did your best. Sometimes that is not enough, and it is not your fault." "Then whose fault is it? The Drought's? The world's? God's, maybe, but not yours." She placed a hand on his arm. "You cannot carry this guilt, Xander. It will crush you." He knew she was right, but knowing and feeling were different things. "I am letting my father down." "No," Rose said firmly. "You are surviving. You are adapting. That is what your father would want, not for you to go down with the ship out of misplaced loyalty to the past." Xander turned to her, and the understanding in her eyes nearly broke him. "How do you do it? How do you let go?" "Painfully," she admitted. "But you do it anyway because the alternative is giving up entirely. And you are not a man who gives up, Xander Kincaid. If you were, you would not still be here." They returned to Rose's ranch, their ranch now, and Xander tried to focus on what he was gaining rather than what he was losing. It helped that the work kept him busy and that Rose's presence provided constant distraction. She had a way of pulling him out of dark thoughts with a practical observation, or a dry comment that made him smile despite himself. As autumn deepened, and the first hints of cooler weather arrived, though still no rain, Xander found himself watching Rose more and more. The way she moved through her daily tasks with efficient grace, the way she hummed quietly while she cooked, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, a small crease forming between her eyebrows, the way she laughed, a full genuine sound that was increasingly common as the weeks passed. He was falling in love with her. He realized one evening as they sat on the porch together, her mending in her lap and him whittling a new handle for a broken tool. The realization should have terrified him, but instead it felt as natural as breathing. Of course he loved her. How could he not? She had offered him hope when he had none, partnership when he had nothing to give in return, and friendship when he had been utterly alone. But he said nothing. Rose had been clear that she was not asking for anything beyond partnership. She had suffered enough loss in her life. The last thing she needed was him complicating their working relationship with feelings she might not share. So he kept his love quiet, a secret he carried like a talisman, something precious he could protect. November brought Thanksgiving, and Rose insisted on a proper celebration despite the ongoing drought. She cooked a turkey that Xander had managed to trade work for in town, along with all the traditional accompaniments. They ate at her dining table, which she had covered with her best tablecloth, and for a few hours they could pretend that life was normal and good. "What are you thankful for this year?" Rose asked as they lingered over apple pie and coffee. Xander considered the question. 6 months ago, he would have said he had nothing to be thankful for. Now, looking across the table at Rose with candlelight flickering between them, his answer was clear. "This, the chance to start over." Rose's expression softened. "I am thankful for the same things." "You have made this house feel less empty, Xander. I did not realize how much I needed that until you were here." "You saved my life," he said quietly. "I want you to know that. When I came here in August, I was barely holding on. You gave me a reason to keep going." "You saved mine too," Rose replied. "Maybe we saved each other." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Xander wanted to reach across the table to take her hand to tell her everything he was feeling, but fear held him back. Fear of rejection, fear of ruining what they had built, fear of bringing pain to someone who had already suffered so much. Rose looked away first, clearing dishes with sudden briskness, and the moment passed. But something had shifted. The air between them felt different now, charged with possibility. December brought cold nights and the first real hope of rain. Clouds gathered over the hills, dark and promising, and everyone in Petaluma watched the sky with desperate hope. Xander and Rose prepared for precipitation, repairing gutters and setting out barrels to catch water, but the clouds kept passing over without releasing their burden. Christmas was approaching, and Rose asked Xander what he wanted. "I do not need anything," he said honestly. "You have already given me more than I could have asked for." "Everyone needs something," Rose insisted. "Tell me one thing you want, even if it seems small." Xander thought about it. "My mother had a music box. It was one of the few nice things she owned. It played a waltz, and sometimes on Sunday evenings, she and my father would dance in the kitchen while it played. After she died, my father kept it on his dresser. When I had to leave the ranch, I had to leave it behind. I know the bank will auction everything, and I hate the thought of strangers having it. It was not valuable, but it mattered to us. Where is the ranch now? Who is living there? No one. It is just sitting empty until the bank sells it." "Then let's go get it," Rose said decisively. "The music box and anything else you want to save. It is still your property until the official sale. You have every right to take your personal belongings." They rode out the next morning under a gray sky that promised but never delivered rain. The ranch looked even more desolate than Xander remembered, the windows dark, the front door slightly ajar from where he had not bothered to lock it on his final visit. Inside, everything was covered in dust. Rose walked through the room silently, and Xander wondered what she was thinking. This house was so different from her own well-maintained home, a testament to his failure rather than his success. "It is a good house," Rose said finally, running her hand along the mantel. "Strong bones. Your father built well. It is falling apart. Buildings can be repaired. What is important is the foundation." She turned to him. "Get what you want to keep. Take your time." Xander gathered the music box, his mother's Bible, his father's wedding ring, a quilt his grandmother had made, and a few other items that held more sentimental value than monetary worth. Rose helped him load everything into the wagon they had brought, her presence making the task less painful than it would have been alone. As they prepared to leave, Xander took one last look at the house. "Goodbye," he said softly. "Thank you for the good years." Rose linked her arm through his, a gesture of solidarity and comfort. "You are not saying goodbye to your memories. Those go with you. You are just saying goodbye to a place. It was more than a place, I know, but where you are going is more than a place too." They returned to their ranch, and Xander set the music box on a shelf in his cabin. That evening, Rose knocked on his door, which was unusual. She typically respected his privacy in the evenings. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Of course." She entered, looking around the small space with interest. She had never been inside the cabin since he had moved in. "Will you show me the music box?" Xander took it down and wound the mechanism. The tinny waltz filled the cabin, sweet and slightly out of tune but still recognizable. Rose listened with her eyes closed, a small smile on her face. "It is lovely," she said when the music wound down. "Your parents must have been happy together." They were. Even when things were hard, they had each other. My father used to say that as long as you had someone to dance with, life could not be all bad. That is a nice philosophy. Rose opened her eyes and looked at him. "Do you dance, Xander?" "I used to. My mother taught me when I was young. I have not in years." "Would you dance with me now?" His heart stuttered. "What? Dance with me? Wind up the music box and dance with me." "It is nearly Christmas and I could use some joy." "Rose, please, unless you do not want to." "I want to," he said quickly. "I just did not think you would." He wound the music box again, and the waltz resumed. Rose stepped closer, placing one hand on his shoulder and extending the other for him to take. Xander held her carefully, hyper-aware of every point of contact, her hand warm in his, her waist beneath his other hand. They began to move, slow and slightly awkward at first in the confined space. But gradually they found their rhythm, moving together to the tinny music. Rose was lighter than he expected, following his lead easily, her green eyes locked on his. "Why did you really want to dance?" Xander asked quietly. "Because I wanted to be close to you," Rose admitted. "Because I wanted an excuse to have you hold me. Because lately, I have been thinking about things I probably should not be thinking about." "What kind of things?" "Things like how I look forward to seeing you every morning, how I find excuses to work near you during the day, how I miss you when you are in your cabin at night." She paused. "Things like how I think I might be falling in love with you, and I do not know what to do about it." Xander stopped moving, though the music continued. "Rose, I know I said I was not asking for anything beyond partnership. And I am not. If you do not feel the same way, we can pretend this conversation never happened. I will not make things awkward. I just needed to be honest because I am tired of pretending I do not feel what I feel. You think you might be falling in love with me. I think I already have fallen. These past few months, you have become essential to me, not just as a business partner, as a person. I care about you, Xander, deeply. And I know it is probably too soon after Thomas, and maybe it makes me a terrible widow, but I cannot help how I feel. You are not a terrible widow. You are an incredible woman." Xander cupped her face with one hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "And you are not alone in this. I have been in love with you for weeks, maybe months. I just did not think I had the right to say anything. You have given me so much already. You have given me just as much. You brought life back to this house. You made me feel less alone. You reminded me that I could be more than just a woman surviving. I could be a woman living. Rose, I have nothing to offer you except myself. I am a man who lost everything. You are a man with a good heart and strong hands and a kind soul. That is everything I need." She leaned into his touch. "Your heart is all the wealth I need, Xander." The words struck him like lightning, illuminating something he had not quite understood until that moment. All this time, he had been measuring his worth in land and cattle and money, external things that could be taken away. But Rose was saying that his true value, the thing that mattered most, was something that could not be lost to drought or debt or disaster. His heart. His capacity to care, to work, to love. That was what she valued. "Say that again," he whispered. "Your heart is all the wealth I need. Rose Jameson, I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Then be terrified with me," she said, "because I love you too." He kissed her then, finally, pulling her close and claiming her mouth with all the pent-up longing of the past months. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his. The music box wound down behind them, but they kept moving together, lost in their own rhythm now. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rose smiled up at him. "So what happens now?" "I think you should marry me," Xander said, surprising himself with his boldness. "I know it is fast, and I know people will talk, but I do not care. I want to spend my life with you, Rose, as your partner in business and in everything else." "That is a terrible proposal," Rose said, but she was laughing. "Very unromantic. Then let me do it properly." Xander dropped to one knee in the small cabin, still holding her hand. "Rose Jameson, you saved my life when I had nothing left. You offered me partnership when I could not offer you anything in return. You saw value in me when I could not see it in myself. You are the strongest, kindest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I am hopelessly in love with you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? tears sparkled in Rose's eyes. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. He stood and kissed her again, and it felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. She was his home now, he realized. Not the land or the house or the ranch, but her. This woman who had taken a chance on him, who had believed in him, who had loved him despite all his failures. When? Rose asked when they finally came up for air. Whenever you want. Tomorrow, if you would have me. Let's wait until spring, Rose said. Give people time to adjust to the idea. And besides, I want to plan a proper wedding. I did not get one with Thomas. We just went to the courthouse. This time I want to do it right. Spring it is. Though I warn you, waiting will be torture. Rose smiled, a mischievous glint in her eye. Who says we have to wait for everything? We are engaged now, that is practically married. Rose Jameson, are you suggesting something scandalous? I am a 30-year-old widow twice over. I am well past the age of propriety, and besides, we are partners in every other way. Why not this too? Xander needed no further invitation. He kissed her again, and this time neither of them held anything back. Later, much later, they lay together in his narrow cabin bed, Rose's head on his chest and his arms wrapped around her. Outside, the wind had picked up, and something that might have been rain tapped against the window. Is that what I think it is? Rose asked, lifting her head. Xander listened. I think it might be. They got up and opened the door, not bothering to dress. Outside, rain was falling, not hard but steady and real. The drought was not over, but it was breaking. The land would heal. Given time, everything would heal. It is a sign, Rose said, laughing as the rain wet her face. A good omen for us. Xander pulled her close, both of them standing naked in the doorway watching the rain fall on the parched earth. I love you, Rose. I love you, Xander. Thank you for losing everything. If you had not, you never would have come here and I never would have found you. Best loss of my life. They went back inside eventually, back to the warm bed and each other's arms. And outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away months of dust and bringing the promise of new growth. The engagement was announced in early January, and as Rose had predicted, people talked. Some were supportive, saying it was good that Rose had found happiness again. Others were scandalized, claiming it was too soon after Thomas's death, and probably inappropriate for a widow to remarry with such apparent eagerness. Rose faced the gossip with the same dignity she brought to everything, holding her head high and refusing to justify her choices to anyone. Xander tried to do the same, though it bothered him more than he wanted to admit when people suggested he was marrying Rose for her money or her land. Let them talk, Rose said firmly when he mentioned it. They do not know us. They do not know what we have been through or what we mean to each other. Their opinions do not matter. But what if they are right? What if people think I am taking advantage of you? Then they are fools. You have worked harder than any man I have ever known, and you ask for nothing you have not earned. Anyone who suggests otherwise does not understand the first thing about your character. Her faith in him was humbling. Xander threw himself into ranch work with renewed vigor, determined to prove that he was worthy of her trust. The January rains continued, sporadic but regular, and the land began to respond. Green shoots appeared in places that had been barren for years. The cattle fattened up, and the well, already deep, overflowed for the first time in ages. Rose and Xander worked side by side, planning not just their wedding but their future. They talked about expanding the herd gradually, about improving the house, about maybe eventually buying back Xander's old ranch if it came up for reasonable sale. They talked about children, both of them wanting a family, and about growing old together on this land they both loved. The wedding was planned for late April, when the hills would be green and the wildflowers in bloom. Rose threw herself into preparations, sewing her own dress with help from some of the more supportive women in town. Xander felt useless in the face of all the planning, so he focused on making sure the ranch was in perfect condition for when they returned from their brief honeymoon. They decided to have the ceremony at the ranch itself, in the yard between the house and the barn, with a simple reception following. It would be small, just close friends and a few family members Rose had back east who were willing to make the journey. Xander had no family to invite, but that felt fitting somehow. He was starting fresh, building a new family with Rose. One evening in March, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the now green hills in shades of gold, Rose turned to him with a serious expression. "I need to tell you something, and I want you to be completely honest about how you feel." Xander's stomach clenched. "All right. I went to the doctor in town last week. I have been feeling strange, tired, but also energized, and I wanted to make sure everything was all right." She paused. "Xander, I am pregnant." He stared at her, the words taking a moment to fully register. "You are." "About 2 months along, the doctor thinks, from that first night in December." Her eyes searched his face anxiously. "I know this is not ideal, being pregnant before we are married. People will definitely talk, but I want you to know that I am happy about it, even if the timing is not perfect. I want this baby, our baby." Xander felt a smile spreading across his face, growing wider until he was grinning like a fool. "Rose, that is incredible. That is the best news you could have given me." Relief flooded her expression. "Really, you are not upset?" "Upset? I am thrilled. We are going to be parents." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "I love you so much, and I already love this baby." "People will count the months. Let them count. They can think whatever they want. I know the truth, which is that I am the luckiest man alive." He placed a hand on her still flat stomach, awed by the idea that their child was growing there. "When will he or she arrive?" "September, most likely. Maybe early October. A fall baby, perfect timing. The work will be slowing down by then." Rose laughed, leaning into him, always thinking practically. "Someone has to. You are the romantic one," says the man who proposed on one knee in a tiny cabin. They sat together as the sun finished setting, making plans for their expanding family and their future. The drought was truly breaking now, the land responding with enthusiasm to the regular rains. Petaluma was recovering, and so were they. The wedding day arrived clear and beautiful, the hills around the ranch covered in green grass and carpeted with wildflowers. Rose looked stunning in her simple white dress, her auburn hair adorned with wildflowers that Xander had picked that morning. He wore his best suit, borrowed from a friend since his own had been left behind at his old ranch, and he tried not to feel too nervous as guests began arriving. The ceremony was officiated by the local minister, a kind man who had known Thomas Jameson and who seemed genuinely happy for Rose's second chance at happiness. Xander's hands shook as he slipped the simple gold band onto Rose's finger, but his voice was steady as he spoke his vows. "Rose, you came into my life when I had nothing left to offer. You saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself. You offered me partnership, friendship, and love, asking for nothing in return. You are my home, my hope, my heart. I promise to spend the rest of my life earning your trust, supporting your dreams, and loving you with everything I have. You told me once that my heart was all the wealth you needed. I promise to give you that heart fully and completely, today and every day forward." Rose's eyes shimmered with tears as she spoke her own vows. "Xander, when you walked onto my property last August, I did not know I was welcoming my future. You brought life back to this ranch and to my heart. You work with integrity, love with sincerity, and face every challenge with courage. I promise to stand beside you through good times and hard times, to build our future together, and to love you for all my days. Your heart is all the wealth I need, and I will treasure it always." The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Xander kissed Rose, the small gathering of guests erupted in applause. It was official now. They were truly partners in every sense. The reception was simple but joyful. There was food and music, and someone had brought a fiddle, so there was dancing in the yard under the spring sky. Xander danced with Rose, holding her close and thinking about how different his life was from what it had been just 9 months ago. He had lost his ranch, his inheritance, everything he had worked for, and yet he had gained so much more. As the sun set and the guests began to drift away, Rose pulled him close. "Happy, happier than I have ever been. You, completely. Though I will be happier when we can finally be alone in our house." They had decided that, after the wedding, Xander would officially move into the main house. The cabin would be kept for future hired help or possibly for when their children grew older and needed their own space. Finally, the last guest departed and they were alone. Xander swept Rose into his arms, carrying her across the threshold of the house, even though she was laughing and protesting that it was unnecessary. "We are married now," he said. "I am allowed to be sentimental." "Then be sentimental upstairs," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with promise. They made love as husband and wife for the first time, the windows open to let in the spring breeze and the scent of wildflowers. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Rose's head on his chest and his hand resting on her stomach where their child grew. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Xander admitted quietly. "After losing the ranch, I thought my life was over. I thought I had failed completely." "You did not fail. You just found a different path, the better path, the one that led to you." "We led to each other," Rose corrected. "I needed you just as much as you needed me." "Your heart is all the wealth I need," Xander quoted softly. "You were right about that. All the land and cattle in the world are not worth as much as this, as us. Now you are getting sentimental. I learned from the best." They drifted to sleep eventually, the first night of their married life peaceful and perfect. The months that followed were busy and happy. The ranch thrived under their joint management, the combination of Rose's planning and Xander's experience proving to be a powerful partnership. By summer, they had expanded their herd and made enough profit to start making improvements to the property. In July, news came that Xander's old ranch was being auctioned. He and Rose discussed whether they should try to buy it, but ultimately decided against it. That chapter of Xander's life was closed. He had moved on, and he did not need to reclaim the past to feel whole. His future was here with Rose. The buyer turned out to be a young couple from Sacramento, newly married themselves, looking to make a fresh start. Xander met them once by chance in town and was relieved to find them eager and optimistic. Maybe they would succeed where he had failed. He hoped so. Rose's pregnancy progressed normally, though the summer heat made her uncomfortable. Xander did everything he could to make her life easier, taking on more of the heavy work and insisting she rest in the heat of the day. She protested but eventually gave in, spending her afternoons in the shade of the porch with her sewing or her books. "I am not an invalid," she grumbled one particularly hot afternoon. "I can still work." "I know you can, but you do not have to. Let me take care of you for once." "You have been taking care of me for almost a year. It is my turn. You take care of me every day. Then let me take care of you more." She smiled, shaking her head but not arguing further. Xander was learning her tells, the ways she showed love even when she was being stubborn. The way she made his favorite foods even when she was tired. The way she always waited up for him no matter how late he worked. The way she reached for him in the night, even in sleep, In early September, Rose went into labor. It was evening, and Xander had just come in from the barn when she grabbed his arm, her face pale. "It is time." Panic flared in his chest. "Now, are you sure? Babies do not wait for convenient timing. Get the doctor." Xander rode into town faster than he had ever ridden, returning with the doctor and the midwife in record time. Then began the longest night of his life. The women shooed him out of the bedroom, leaving him to pace the living room and pray to a God he had not talked to much since his parents died. He could hear Rose's groans of pain through the closed door, and it killed him that he could not help her, could not take the pain away or share it. All he could do was wait and hope and pray that she would be all right. Finally, as dawn broke over the hills, he heard a new sound, the sharp cry of a newborn baby. Moments later, the midwife emerged, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Kincaid, a healthy, strong boy, and your wife is doing well." Relief nearly buckled his knees. "Can I see them?" "Give us a few minutes to get them settled." Those few minutes felt like hours, but finally he was allowed into the bedroom. Rose lay propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up when he entered, her smile tired but triumphant. "Come meet your son." Xander approached slowly, almost reverently. The baby was tiny, red-faced and wrinkled with a surprising amount of dark hair. He was perfect. "Can I hold him?" Xander asked. Rose transferred the baby to his arms carefully, and Xander stared down at his son in wonder. This was his child, his and Rose's, a new life they had created together, a future made tangible. "What should we name him?" Rose asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one definitively. Now, looking at his son, Xander knew what felt right. "Samuel, after my father." "If that is all right with you, Samuel Kincaid, I like it." Rose reached out and Xander took her hand, the three of them connected. "He is beautiful. He looks like you. He has your chin." "How can you tell? He barely has a chin yet." Rose laughed weakly. "I just know." A mother knows these things. They sat together as the sun rose fully, bathing the room in golden light. Little Samuel slept peacefully, unaware of how wanted he was, how loved, how much hope he represented. "We did it," Rose said softly. "We built something real, a family." "We did," Xander agreed. "Against all odds, we actually did it." The next few weeks were an exhausting blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Xander had never been happier. He took over more of the ranch work to let Rose rest and recover, though she was back on her feet faster than he would have liked. Together, they navigated the challenges of new parenthood, learning as they went, making mistakes and celebrating small victories. Samuel was a good baby, or as good as any baby could be. He ate well and grew quickly, and he had Rose's green eyes, which delighted Xander to no end. Watching Rose with their son, seeing the gentleness and love she showed, made Xander fall in love with her all over again. The drought was officially over by October, declared ended by the state after 2 years of normal rainfall. Petaluma was recovering, new families moving in to replace those who had left, businesses reopening. The whole region felt renewed, as if the rain had washed away not just the dust but the despair that had hung over everything. On their first anniversary in late April 1880, Xander and Rose hired someone to watch Samuel for the evening so they could have a quiet dinner together. Rose had cooked his favorite meal, and they ate by candlelight at the dining table, talking and laughing like they had in those early months before Samuel arrived. "Has it really only been a year?" Rose asked. "It feels like you have always been here." "The best year of my life," Xander said. "Despite all the sleepless nights and the constant chaos. Do you ever regret it, losing your ranch, ending up here?" "Not for a second. I lost land and gained everything that matters. I would make that trade 1,000 times over." "Your heart really is all the wealth I need," Rose said, echoing the words she had spoken that transformative night in December. "Everything else is just extra. Same for me. You and Samuel, you are my wealth, my purpose, my everything." They made love that night with a passion renewed by the months of exhaustion and distraction, reaffirming their connection and their commitment. And afterward, lying in each other's arms, they talked about the future. "You want more children?" Rose asked. "If you do." "I would be happy with just Samuel or with a whole houseful, whatever makes you happy." "I want at least one more, maybe two. I want Samuel to have siblings, to not be alone the way you were after your brother left. Then we will have more. No rush, though. Let us enjoy Samuel being small while we can." Life continued in its pleasant rhythm through 1880 and into 1881. The ranch prospered, and they were able to make significant improvements to the property. They built a new barn, expanded the house slightly to add a proper nursery, and invested in better breeding stock for their herd. The success was thrilling, but also humbling. Xander never forgot how close he had come to losing everything, and that memory kept him grateful and grounded. Samuel grew from infant to toddler, walking early and getting into everything with the fearless enthusiasm of a child who knew he was loved. He adored his mother but was clearly fascinated by his father, following Xander around the ranch whenever he was allowed, his small hand clasped in his father's larger one. In the spring of 1882, Rose announced she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was planned and anticipated, and Xander felt more prepared for what was coming. Samuel was nearly 2.5, old enough to be excited about becoming a big brother even if he did not fully understand what that meant. The second pregnancy was harder on Rose than the first had been, with more sickness and fatigue. Xander worried constantly, but the doctor assured him that everything was normal and Rose was healthy. Still, he insisted she rest more, hired additional help for the ranch, and did everything he could to reduce her burden. Their daughter, Emma Rose Kincaid, was born in late October 1882, a tiny thing with wispy blonde hair and her mother's face. Samuel was both fascinated and slightly jealous, but he quickly adapted to his role as big brother, proudly showing Emma to anyone who visited. With 2 children, life became more chaotic but also richer. The house was full of noise and laughter, of crying and playing, of all the small daily dramas that made up family life. Xander had never imagined he could be this content. He who had once measured his worth in land and cattle now measured it in bedtime stories and small hands reaching for him, and his wife's smile across a dinner table full of happy chaos. Years passed, good years full of hard work and steady growth. The ranch expanded gradually, becoming one of the most successful in the area. Xander and Rose were recognized as leaders in the community, respected for their fair dealing and their commitment to helping others. When drought threatened again in the mid-1880s, they shared their water conservation techniques with struggling neighbors, remembering how desperate they had once been. Samuel and Emma grew, joined eventually by another son, Thomas Xander Kincaid, born in 1885 and named for Rose's late husband in a gesture that Xander insisted on. Rose had cried when he suggested it, touched that he wanted to honor the man who had come before him. "Thomas would have liked you," she told him that night. "You are different men, but you both had good hearts. That is what I have always valued most." By 1890, Xander was 41 and Rose was 42, and they sat on their porch one evening watching their 3 children play in the yard. Samuel was nearly 11, Emma was 7, and Thomas was 5. The ranch was thriving, the house was full of love, and the future stretched out bright and promising. You remember that first morning when I came here looking for work? Xander asked, his hand finding Rose's as it always did. I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. And instead, you found everything that mattered, Rose finished. We both did. Your heart is all the wealth I need, Xander quoted, the words that had become something of a motto for them over the years. You were right about that, Rose. You were right about everything. Not everything, but I was right about us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children and counting their blessings. Xander thought about his father's old ranch, long since sold and rebuilt by its new owners. He thought about the drought that had destroyed his first dream but led him to a better one. He thought about all the twisting paths that had brought him to this moment, this place, this woman, this life. He had lost everything in the drought of 1879. His land, his inheritance, his pride, his sense of self. But in losing it all, he had found what he did not know he needed. Not just Rose, though she was the center of it, but purpose and partnership and family. He had learned that wealth was not measured in acres or gold, but in love and connection and the warmth of a hand in his. Samuel came running up to the porch, his face flushed with play. Papa, will you come play with us? Emma says I am doing it wrong, but I know I am not. Xander looked at Rose, who smiled and nodded. Go on. I will get supper started. He followed his son into the yard, joining the game with enthusiasm, his children's laughter ringing out across the land he and Rose had built together. As the sun set over the green hills, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson, Xander felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He had lost everything and gained the world, and he would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought him here. Later that night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Xander and Rose prepared for sleep in their own room. Rose sat at her vanity brushing out her hair, now streaked with early gray, and Xander watched her from the bed, struck as always by how beautiful she was to him. What are you thinking about? Rose asked, catching his gaze in the mirror. How lucky I am, how grateful. Still, after all these years, especially after all these years. Every day with you is a gift, Rose, every single day. She turned to face him. You are the gift, Xander. You came into my life when I thought I was done with living and reminded me what it meant to truly be alive. You gave me children and partnership and love. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything, he corrected, holding out his hand to her. She came to bed, settling into his arms as naturally as breathing. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed softly. The sounds of their life, their home, their world. I love you, Rose murmured, already half asleep. I love you too, always. They drifted into sleep, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from loss and hardship. The drought had taken much from both of them, but it had also brought them together, and that was worth more than any price they had paid. Their story was not one of easy triumph or simple happiness. It was a story of survival and adaptation, of finding hope in dark times, of learning that sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what truly matters. It was a story of two broken people becoming whole together, of partnership and love, and the quiet courage it takes to keep moving forward when everything seems lost. And as they slept in their comfortable bed in their thriving ranch with their 3 beautiful children safe under the same roof, the story continued. There would be more challenges ahead, more hardships and triumphs, more joys and sorrows. Life was like that, an endless cycle of gain and loss. But they would face it all together, Xander and Rose, partners in everything. Because they had learned the most important lesson of all, that love is the only wealth that can never be taken away, the only treasure that grows rather than diminishes when shared. The cowboy had lost everything in the drought, but the widow had shown him that his heart was all the wealth she needed, and in doing so, she had given him back himself. She had given him a future. She had given him home, and that was worth more than all the ranches in California.